The Little Match Girl. One snowy December evening, on the bitter, bustling streets of London, there walked barefoot a little match girl. She was not much older than you are now, and I'm sad to say that she had no mother or father, and no brothers and sisters. She slept in a tiny space at the orphanage where the owner, Mr. Hackleton, would scold her if she did not bring home enough money. In her bag were some bundles of matches. Why, you ask? Because this was how she had been able to survive. Mr. Hackleton would give her the matches in the morning, and she would sort them into pretty bundles with string or ribbon that she'd found, and she'd sell them to passers-by. If she made enough money, she would be able to buy a piece of bread or a potato. If not, she would have to rummage through the rubbish bins and hope someone had thrown out something almost fresh. It wasn't much of a life, especially on days like today when not a single person had stopped to buy a single match. But the little girl was happy. As the snow fell onto her hair, she smelled the sweet aroma of cooked dinners seeping from the houses and kitchens. Do love New Year's Eve, she thought to herself, and next year will be better. She had a few places where she could stay out of the worst of the cold, and this was one of them. She tucked herself into a dark corner of an alleyway between two houses and decided she would sleep there for the night. It was freezing cold on the street, but not as cold as the orphanage, where the large holes in the roof let the bitter wind blow through. Plus, if she went back without selling any matches, then Mr. Hackleton would scold her badly. The little match girl was feeling especially cold, and her thoughts drifted to the matches in her hand. Did she dare strike one to warm herself on the golden flame? Mr. Hackleton would be so angry if any of the matches were missing. Without another thought, she took out a match and struck it across the rough brick. It spurted, flashed, and burned for a few precious moments, and the warmth was like a tiny candle on her frozen skin. Oh, it felt wonderful. She closed her eyes and imagined she was sitting in front of a great open fire. But just as quickly as the flame arrived, it was gone, and all that was left was a blackened stick. Without hesitating, she took another match from the bundle and scratched it once again on the wall. It burned even brighter than the first, and she looked into the flame and could clearly see a room with fine crockery and a dining table with a white cloth. There, in pride of place on the table, was a roasted goose, stuffed with prunes and apples steaming hot from the oven. She licked her lips, and then her mouth dropped wide open in surprise as the goose jumped from the table and began to dance. The match went out, and the night was dark and cold once more, and the goose was gone. She took another match from the bundle, struck it, and looked carefully at the flame. This time, she could see her own grandmother, smiling peacefully back at her. She gazed in wonder at that kind, gentle face in the flame. "Grandmother," she cried, "I want to be near a warm stove, eating the roasted goose by a beautiful Christmas tree." And when the match went out, she grabbed all of the matches from the bundle and she struck them all on the wall. The matches burned brighter than the midday sun. Her grandmother's face was there again. She had never looked so beautiful, and the girl stretched out her arms, and her grandmother took her in her arms and held her tightly, and they flew away above the streets and the houses, climbing higher and higher, where there was no cold, no hunger, and no fear. The next morning, sat up against the wall between those two houses, was the little match girl, with pale blue cheeks and a smile on her lips. She was frozen to death. The matches in her hand were burned down to nothing. The people who found her say that she simply wanted to warm herself. But no one knew what beautiful things she had seen and how happy she had been in her final moments. The busy town carried on without her, of course. The people went about their lives and the world kept turning. But the little match girl had found true happiness at last.